The courthouse stood like a tombstone against the blazing Arizona sun, its weathered brick facade bearing witness to countless broken promises and shattered dreams. Clayton Hartwell stood before Judge Morrison, his calloused hands hanging empty at his sides, watching as his wife of 12 years dismantled their life with the cold efficiency of a butcher carving meat. "I want everything," Judith declared, her voice sharp as a scorpion's sting. "The cattle, the land deeds, the accounts at First National." She paused, her lips curling into a smile that never reached her eyes. "He can keep that burned-out shack his grandfather left him. It's fitting, really, ashes to ashes." The courtroom erupted in muffled laughter. Clayton felt each chuckle like a physical blow, but he kept his weathered face impassive, his gray eyes fixed on a water stain on the far wall. He'd learned long ago that dignity was sometimes all a man had left to hold on to. "Mrs. Hartwell." Judge Morrison adjusted his spectacles. "Are you certain you want nothing from the ancestral property? It may have residual value." Judith's laugh rang out like breaking glass. "Value? Have you seen it? Your Honor, it's nothing but charred timber and scorched earth. My husband's legacy. Everything he touches turns to ruin." Beside her, Theodore Blackwood, the young banker who'd been warming her bed for the past 6 months, placed a proprietary hand on her shoulder. His suit was Eastern cut, his boots polished to mirror shine. Everything about him screamed money and privilege. Everything Clayton had once been, before the drought, before the fire, before the world decided to take everything from him. "Mr. Hartwell." The judge's voice softened slightly. "Do you contest any of these arrangements?" Clayton finally spoke, his voice rough from disuse. "No, Your Honor. Just want my grandfather's land. Nothing else." "Such nobility," Judith mocked. "Still playing the martyr, Clay? Still pretending you're better than everyone else?" She turned to address the courtroom spectators. "This man had everything. The biggest ranch in 3 counties, more cattle than he could count, and he lost it all through sheer stupidity and pride." The crowd murmured their agreement. Clayton recognized most of them. Merchants he'd owed money to, ranchers who'd bought his cattle at rock-bottom prices when he'd been desperate, townspeople who'd once tipped their hats to him and now avoided his gaze. The fire wasn't his fault. A lone voice spoke up from the back. Old Sam McGraw, the blacksmith, one of the few who still acknowledged Clayton existed. "Wasn't it?" Judith's eyes glittered dangerously. "Who refused to sell when the railroad offered top dollar? Who insisted on honoring his grandfather's memory instead of taking care of his family? Who left me to watch everything we'd built crumble because of his stubborn pride?" The judge's gavel ended the discussion. Divorce granted. Property divided as stated. Court adjourned. Clayton turned to leave, but Judith's voice stopped him. "Oh, Clay, I'll need you out of the house by tomorrow. Theodore and I have plans for it." She leaned into her new lover, making sure Clayton saw the diamond on her finger, larger than anything he'd ever given her. "Already gone," Clayton said quietly. "Moved out this morning. To that ruin." Judith's laughter followed him to the door. "Perfect. You can sit in the ashes and remember when you were somebody, when you mattered." Outside, the sun hit Clayton like a physical force. Main Street stretched before him, dusty and unforgiving. People stepped aside as he passed, as if failure might be contagious. He made his way to the livery stable where his last possession waited. Buck, a 15-year-old gelding with more gray in his muzzle than brown. "Rough day. Mr. Hartwell," the stable boy. Jimmy couldn't meet his eyes. "Seen worse." Clayton lied, pressing a worn silver dollar into the boy's palm, his last one. He led Buck to the general store, where Mrs. Patterson waited on the porch, a small bundle at her feet. "Got your things together," she said, not unkindly. "Some cornmeal, beans, salt pork. That squares us on your account." Clayton nodded his thanks, tying the meager supplies to Buck's saddle alongside his bedroll. His father's Navy Colt with its cracked grip, and a canteen that leaked if you didn't hold it just right. Everything he owned in the world. Clay, "Mrs." Patterson called as he mounted up. "Martha wanted you to have this." She handed him a small, wrapped bundle. "Bread, fresh this morning." His throat tightened. "Thank her for me. You could stay, start over, maybe work for one of the other ranches." "No." The word came out harsher than intended. "But thank you." He turned Buck toward the edge of town, where the mountains rose like broken teeth against the sky. Behind him, he heard Judith's carriage rattle past, heard her gay laughter mixing with Theodore's deeper tones. He didn't look back. The road to his grandfather's land was barely a trail anymore. 20 miles of heat, dust, and memories. Buck picked his way carefully through the rocky terrain, occasionally snorting at the buzzards circling overhead. Clayton let the horse set the pace, his mind drifting to another time, when he'd ridden this trail with his grandfather, full of dreams and certainty. "This land don't look like much," the old man had said, "but it's got good bones. Water runs deep here, boy. When everything else dries up, this land endures." The sun was beginning its descent when Clayton finally saw it, the remains of his grandfather's homestead. The fire had taken most of it 3 months ago, leaving only the stone foundation and chimney standing like monuments to better days. The barn was gone, the corrals fallen, the well clogged with debris. He dismounted, leading Buck to a scraggly cottonwood that had somehow survived. His boots crunched on glass from the blown-out windows. In what had been the main room, he found the iron stove, warped but intact, the kitchen table, reduced to charcoal, his grandmother's piano, a twisted mass of wire and burned wood. But in the root cellar, protected by stone and earth, he found treasures, his grandfather's tools, wrapped in oilcloth, seed packets his grandmother had saved, preserving jars, empty but whole. And beneath a false bottom he'd installed years ago, a leather portfolio containing papers that would have made Judith's greed explode like dynamite, if she'd known they existed. Clayton didn't open it. Not yet. The $10 million in bearer bonds and gold certificates left by his uncle Marcus, who'd struck it rich in the Colorado silver boom, could wait. He hadn't touched them during the worst of his troubles, hadn't mentioned them during the divorce. They were his secret, his last card to play. But not yet. Not until he'd earned the right to prosperity again. As darkness fell, he made camp in the lee of the stone chimney. The bread misses. Patterson had given him tasted of kindness and sympathy, flavors he'd have to get used to swallowing. Above, the stars emerged one by one, indifferent to human suffering. Tomorrow, he'd begin clearing the debris. Tomorrow, he'd start rebuilding with his own hands, every blister a penance, every drop of sweat a prayer. He'd prove to himself, if no one else, that Clayton Hartwell was more than his failures, more than his losses. In the distance, a coyote howled, and Buck nickered nervously. Clayton checked the loads in his broken colt, more from habit than real concern. The predators out here were nothing compared to the ones he'd left behind in town. He pulled his blanket tighter and closed his eyes, letting the sound of the wind through the ruins sing him toward sleep. Somewhere in that wind, he could almost hear his grandfather's voice. "The land endures. Boy, the land endures." And so would he, one stone at a time, one day at a time, until he'd built something from these ashes that no one could take away. Not Judith, not Theodore Blackwood, not the whole damn town that had turned its back on him. The money could wait. First, he had to prove he was worth it. 3 months had passed since Clayton arrived at the ruined homestead. His hands, once soft from years of prosperity, now bore the permanent marks of labor calluses thick as leather, scars from barbed wire and sharp stones, nails cracked and eternally dirt-stained. The foundation was clear now, the well functional again after weeks of back-breaking work. He'd managed to construct a rough lean-to against the standing chimney, enough to keep the rain off, but not much more. The solitude had become his companion. Days began before dawn with bitter coffee boiled over an open fire, followed by whatever task demanded attention: clearing brush, hauling stones, patching the makeshift roof. Nights brought exhaustion so complete that even the howling wolves couldn't keep him awake. He'd grown lean and hard, his clothes hanging loose on his frame, his face weathered beyond his 35 years. On this particular morning, Clayton was working on expanding his shelter when Buck's warning snort made him reach for the rifle he kept close. A rider approached from the east, slumped forward in the saddle, his horse moving with the uncertain gait of an animal near collapse. The rider tumbled from his mount before Clayton could reach him. Blood seeped through a makeshift bandage wrapped around his thigh, and his face was gray with pain and dehydration. Clayton recognized the type. A drifter. Maybe a cowhand, certainly someone who'd met trouble on the trail. "Easy there," Clayton said, easing the man onto his back. The wound was ugly, but not fatal if properly tended. "What happened?" "Apaches," the man gasped. 3 days ago. Thought I'd lost them." His eyes rolled back, and he passed out. Clayton worked quickly, a skill learned from years of tending injured cattle and horses. He cleaned the wound with whiskey from his meager medical supplies, picked out fragments of what looked like arrowhead, and bound it tight with strips torn from his last good shirt. The stranger moaned, but didn't wake. For 2 days, Clayton nursed the man, spooning water between cracked lips, keeping the fever at bay with cool compresses. On the 3rd morning, the stranger's eyes opened, clear and alert. "You're alive," Clayton said, offering him water. "Seems so." The man's voice was hoarse. "Nathan Wren's the name. I owe you my life, Mr. Clayton Hartwell, and you don't owe me anything, just passing along a kindness." Nathan studied him with sharp blue eyes. "Hartwell, heard that name. You the one had that big spread north of Prescott?" Clayton's jaw tightened. "Used to. No judgment here. Friend, we've all got our troubles." Nathan tried to sit up, winced, and lay back down. "My sister lives about 10 miles south of here. Ranch called Whispering Creek. If you could get word to her, I'll ride out tomorrow." Clayton promised. "Let her know you're safe." The next morning, Clayton saddled Buck and followed Nathan's directions through a winding canyon he hadn't explored before. Whispering Creek sat in a protected valley. Small but well-maintained, the house sturdy, the garden thriving despite the harsh climate. Smoke rose from the chimney, and chickens pecked in the yard. A woman emerged as he approached, a shotgun held with practiced ease. She was perhaps 30. With dark hair pulled back severely and eyes the same sharp blue as Nathan's. Her dress was plain but clean, her stance wary but not frightened. "That's far enough," she called. "State your business." "Ma'am, I'm Clayton Hartwell. Your brother Nathan is at my place, about 10 miles north. He's hurt but healing." The shotgun lowered slightly. "Nathan? Is he, how bad?" "Arrow wound to the leg. Fever broke yesterday. He'll be fine with rest." She set the gun aside and pressed her hands to her face, shoulders sagging with relief. When she looked up, tears tracked through the dust on her cheeks. "Thank God. I've been worried sick. He was due back a week ago. If you've got a wagon, I can help bring him home." Yes, of course." She wiped her eyes with her apron. "Forgive me. I'm Rachel Wren. Please, let me pack some supplies. You must be hungry." While she prepared, Clayton couldn't help but notice the careful order of her home, everything mended and clean, but showing the wear of hard times. A daguerreotype on the mantel showed her with a tall man, both young and smiling. The man's absence in this lonely place told its own story. Rachel emerged with a basket and a worn medical bag. "I've got the wagon ready. Mr. Hartwell, I can't thank you enough." They made the journey mostly in silence, Rachel handling the wagon team with quiet competence. When they reached Clayton's camp, she didn't comment on the primitive conditions, focusing instead on her brother. "You damn fool," she said softly, checking his bandages. "I told you not to go alone." "Good to see you too, sis." Nathan managed a weak grin. "This man saved my life." Rachel turned to Clayton, and he saw something shift in her expression, a recognition of shared hardship. Perhaps Then I'm in your debt, Mr. Hartwell. No debt, just neighbors helping neighbors. They loaded Nathan carefully into the wagon bed. As Rachel prepared to leave, she reached into her basket and pulled out a loaf of bread and a small crock. It's not much, but I can't, please. Her smile was sad but genuine. I know what it's like to have pride be the only thing left, but even pride needs to eat sometimes. After they left, Clayton sat by his fire, eating the fresh bread and butter, the first he'd tasted in months. It awakened a hunger that had nothing to do with food, a longing for simple human connection he'd thought burned out of him. 2 days later, Rachel returned alone, driving the wagon loaded with supplies. Nathan's recovering well, she said without preamble. He insisted I bring these. She gestured to sacks of cornmeal, beans, salt, and coffee. He says a man who saves lives shouldn't live on jackrabbit and prayers. I can't accept, then trade for them. She looked around his camp with practical eyes. I need firewood cut for winter. Nathan usually does it, but... She shrugged. A cord of wood for the supplies. Fair? Clayton knew charity when he saw it, but also recognized the gift of allowing him his dignity. Fair enough. She stayed long enough to share coffee, sitting on a log across from him, her posture proper even in the rough surroundings. They talked carefully, circling around their respective losses like wary animals. Your husband? Clayton finally asked, nodding toward her wedding ring. Thomas died 2 years ago. Wagon accident. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened on her cup. Some say... She stopped, shook her head. Well, people say a lot of things. They usually do. She looked at him sharply, hearing the bitter experience in his voice. You know how it is. Then, how they whisper, how they judge. I know. A strange comfort settled between them, the recognition of kindred spirits marked by loss. When she left, Clayton felt the emptiness more keenly than before. Over the following weeks, they developed a rhythm of trade. He'd deliver cut wood. She'd send back bread or preserved foods. Sometimes she'd include small things, a needle and thread, a bar of soap, a packet of coffee. He'd reciprocate with game when he was lucky enough to hunt successfully, or wild herbs he'd gathered. One afternoon, arriving with a load of wood, he found her struggling with a broken gate hinge, without words. He set to fixing it, she holding the gate steady while he worked. Their hands brushed accidentally, and both pulled back as if burned. I should go, Clayton said quickly. Stay for supper, she said just as fast, then colored. I mean, it's late, and you've done me a kindness. Nathan's gone to town. It would be proper enough. They ate in her kitchen, the lamplight soft on her face as she served simple fare, beans and cornbread, but seasoned with care. The conversation came easier now, flowing from safe topics to deeper waters. They say I'm cursed, Rachel said suddenly, that I'm barren, that Thomas took his own life because I couldn't give him children. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her fork. The doctor said, after the miscarriage, but people believe what they want to believe. Clayton set down his cup carefully. People said I burned my own ranch for the insurance money, said I was a fool who destroyed his family's legacy. Maybe they were half right. He met her eyes, but only half. She smiled then, small but real. We make quite a pair, don't we? The cursed woman and the failed man. Or maybe just two people still standing when the world tried to knock them down. Their eyes held for a long moment before she looked away. It's getting dark. You should go. But as he left, she pressed a small package into his hands. Ointment, she said. For your hands. No argument. I can see the blisters from here. Riding home under the stars. Clayton felt something he'd thought dead forever, a tiny spark of hope, fragile as a candle flame in the wind. He thought of her sad smile, her capable hands, the way she'd offered him dignity along with charity. In his camp, he opened the ointment and found a note tucked inside. For hands that know honest work, R.W. He smoothed the paper carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket, close to his heart, for the first time in months. The night didn't feel quite so cold, and the wolf howls seemed more lonely than threatening. Tomorrow he'd cut more wood. Maybe fix her chicken coop. He'd noticed it listing to one side. Maybe she'd share another meal, another conversation, another moment of understanding between two souls learning to trust again despite all the reasons not to. The money hidden beneath his floor could wait. This, whatever this was becoming, couldn't. The morning Judith arrived at Clayton's homestead, the sky was the color of old pewter, threatening rain. Clayton was working on the roof of his expanded shelter when Buck's familiar warning caught his attention. But this time, instead of one rider, there were three, a fine carriage incongruous on the rough trail, with two mounted escorts. Clayton climbed down slowly, wiping his hands on his worn pants. He knew that carriage, had bought it for their 5th anniversary. Judith stepped out, her emerald dress pristine despite the dust, her hair arranged in the elaborate style favored by town ladies. Theodore Blackwood followed. His presence meant to intimidate. The third man Clayton didn't recognize, likely a hired hand. "My God, Clay!" Judith's voice dripped with false sympathy. "You're living like an animal." Clayton said nothing, just stood with his hands loose at his sides, waiting. He'd learned that silence often revealed more than questions. "Aren't you going to invite us in?" She gestured mockingly at his rough shelter. "Oh, wait, I suppose you can't. This is even worse than I imagined." Her laugh was bright and cutting. "To think, I once shared a bed with the man who chooses to live in this squalor. What do you want, Judith? Can't a woman check on her former husband, make sure he hasn't starved to death out here in his pride?" Theodore smirked. "Told you this was a waste of time. Darling, look at him. He's got nothing left worth taking. State your business or leave." Clayton said evenly, "I've got work to do." Judith's eyes glittered dangerously. "Such rudeness. And here I came to offer you a chance at redemption. Theodore's bank is buying land for the railroad expansion. We could use this worthless patch for storage. I convinced him to offer you $1,000 for it. Generous. Considering. Not for sale. Don't be a fool. Clay, take the money. Start over somewhere else. Maybe California, where no one knows what you've become." The answer's no. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You always were too proud for your own good. It's what destroyed us, you know, your inability to bend, to compromise, to see reality. Is that what you tell yourself?" Her hand cracked across his face, the sound sharp in the morning air. "How dare you judge me? I spent 12 years watching you chase your grandfather's ghost, pouring everything into land that gave nothing back. I deserve better." Clayton touched his cheek, feeling the sting. Over Judith's shoulder, he saw another rider approaching. Rachel, a basket balanced on her saddle horn. His heart sank. "Company?" Judith turned, taking in Rachel's simple dress, her work-worn hands. "Oh, this is rich. You've found yourself a prairie mouse, haven't you?" She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "How the mighty have fallen." Rachel dismounted with quiet dignity, her face carefully neutral. "Mr. Hartwell, I brought the preserves we discussed." She glanced at the visitors. "I can come back another time. No need to leave on our account," Judith purred. "I'm Judith Blackwood, Clayton's former wife, and you are Rachel Wren." "Wren?" Judith's eyes lit with malicious delight. "Not the widow Wren, the one they say—" She covered her mouth in false shock. "Oh my, Clay, your taste has certainly changed." Rachel's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. "If you'll excuse me—" "Don't go," Clayton said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to Rachel in front of others, and the simple words carried weight. Mrs. Blackwood was just leaving. Such protectiveness. Judith observed, "Tell me, Mrs. Wren, has he mentioned why his first marriage failed? Has he told you about the debts, The failed investments, the way he clung to this worthless land while everything crumbled around us. That's enough. Clayton stepped between them. You got your answer. The land's not for sale. Not now. Not ever. Theodore moved his hand to his coat, a subtle threat. You should reconsider. Hartwell, accidents happen out here. Fires, for instance. Would be a shame if you lost everything. Again. The silence stretched taut. Then Rachel spoke, her voice clear and strong. Are you threatening him, Mr. Blackwood? Because I'm sure Sheriff Morrison would be very interested to hear a banker making threats about arson, especially given the recent fires at the Hendricks and Martinez properties, both of whom refused to sell to your bank. Theodore's face darkened. You can't prove, can't I? Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. My late husband was Thomas Wren. Perhaps you remember him? He kept very detailed records of his legal practice, including some interesting correspondence about those fires. I still have all his files. Judith grabbed Theodore's arm. We're leaving. She turned to Clayton, her beautiful face twisted with spite. You two deserve each other, the failure and the barren widow, playing house in the dirt. They left in a cloud of dust and anger. Clayton and Rachel stood in silence, watching the carriage disappear. The threatened rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder. You should come inside, Clayton said, gesturing to his rough shelter. Such as it is. They sat on upturned crates, rain drumming on the makeshift roof. Rachel's hands shook slightly as she unpacked her basket. More preserves, fresh biscuits, a small pot of honey. Thank you, Clayton said, for what you said. It was true. Thomas did suspect the bank's involvement. She paused. I'm sorry you had to hear those things. About me. I've heard worse about myself. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. She's wrong. You know, about you being a failure. I see how hard you work, how you've rebuilt from nothing. That takes a kind of strength she'll never understand. The rain intensified, becoming a downpour. They moved closer to the fire, shoulders almost touching. Clayton could smell her lavender soap, a delicate contrast to the smoke and earth. Will they come back? Rachel asked. Probably. Theodore doesn't like being told no. Then we'll be ready. The we hung in the air between them, unexpected and precious. Thunder crashed overhead. Rachel jumped, instinctively pressing against Clayton's side. He froze, acutely aware of her warmth, the way her hair brushed his cheek. She didn't pull away. I should tell you something, she said softly. What Judith said about being barren, it's not entirely false. I lost 3 babies. The last one. I nearly died. Thomas blamed himself, thought he was cursed. Some say that's why he... She stopped, tears mixing with the rain that leaked through the roof. Clayton turned to face her, his rough hand covering hers. I'm sorry. The town, they whisper. Say I'm bad luck. Say I drove him to it. Her voice broke. Maybe they're right. They're not. His voice was fierce. You're the strongest woman I know, the kindest, the way you helped me, a stranger, when you had every reason to protect yourself. That's not bad luck, that's grace. She looked up at him, eyes swimming with tears and something else, hope, maybe, or recognition. The space between them disappeared. When their lips met, it was gentle at first, tentative. 2 wounded souls testing if they could trust, then deeper, hungrier. Years of loneliness and pain dissolving in the simple human need for connection. When they broke apart, both breathing hard. Rachel touched his face where Judith had slapped him. She's a fool, she whispered, to throw away a man like you. Rachel, I know we shouldn't. I know what people will say. She stood, wrapping her shawl tight. But I'm tired of living for their whispers. The storm was passing, but darkness approached. Stay, Clayton said, until the rain stops. We can talk. She smiled, sad and sweet. If I stay, we both know it won't be just talk. He stood too, close enough to feel her breath. Would that be so wrong? No, she said simply. But not like this. Not in anger and storms. When if we... I want it to be because we choose each other, not because we're running from ghosts." She kissed him once more, soft and promising, then stepped into the twilight rain. Clayton watched her go, his lips still warm from her touch, his heart hammering against his ribs. When she was gone, he sat by his fire and thought about choices, about Judith's greed and Rachel's courage, about the money hidden beneath his feet and the woman who didn't know it existed but valued him anyway. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd start building a proper house, not for the money, not for revenge, but because somewhere between the wreckage of his old life and this moment, he'd found something worth building for, someone worth becoming better for. The rain had washed the air clean, and stars began to appear through the breaking clouds. Clayton touched his lips, still feeling Rachel's kiss, and smiled for the first time in months. Judith had come to mock his poverty, not knowing she'd revealed his true wealth, the possibility of love with someone who saw past the ashes to the man still standing. Let her keep her banker and her spite. He had something infinitely more precious: hope. The weeks following Judith's visit bloomed with cautious joy. Clayton threw himself into building a proper cabin, and Rachel often arrived with her brother Nathan to help. The three worked in comfortable rhythm, Clayton and Nathan raising walls while Rachel mixed mortar and kept them fed. The structure grew steadily, each log and stone a testament to their shared labor. "You're different," Nathan observed one afternoon, watching Clayton carefully notch a corner beam. "Then when I first met you, less like a man waiting to die." Clayton glanced to where Rachel was tending the cooking fire, her hair glowing copper in the sunlight. "Things change. My sister has that effect," Nathan said quietly. "Just be careful with her. She's had enough hurt." "I know. Do you?" Nathan's blue eyes were sharp. "Because if you're not serious about her, if this is just loneliness talking—" "It's not." Clayton set down his tools, meeting the younger man's gaze directly. "Your sister saved me, Nathan. Not just with food and kindness, but by seeing something worth saving. I'd die before hurting her." Nathan studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good, because I'd have to kill you, and I still owe you for saving my life. Would be inconvenient." They worked in companionable silence after that. The matter settled with masculine simplicity. By evening, the walls stood shoulder high, and they celebrated with venison stew and Rachel's cornbread. As darkness fell, Nathan retired early to the old lean-to, leaving Clayton and Rachel alone by the fire. They sat close, her head resting against his shoulder, watching sparks rise toward the stars. "I've been thinking," Rachel said softly, "about what we're building here. Just a cabin." "Is it?" She turned to look at him. "Because it feels like more, like we're building a life." Clayton pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Would that be so terrible?" "No, but people will talk. They already whisper when I go to town. The banker's discarded wife visiting the widow Wren." She laughed bitterly. "We're quite the scandal." "Let them talk." "Easy for you to say." "You're a man. Your reputation can recover. Mine." She shrugged. "A woman's good name, once lost, is gone forever." "Then marry me." The words hung between them, surprising them both. Rachel sat up, searching his face. "Clay, I mean it." He took her hands, rough calluses against her work-worn smoothness. "I know I've got nothing to offer but hard work and a half-built cabin. I know you deserve better than a failed rancher with more pride than sense. But Rachel, She silenced him with a kiss, deep and desperate. When they broke apart, tears tracked down her cheeks. "You impossible man. You think I care about what you have? You think I need anything more than this?" She pressed her palm over his heart. "Then you? Is that a yes? Ask me properly when your cabin has a roof and a door that locks." Her smile turned mischievous. "I have some standards. Mr. Hartwell." They kissed again, longer this time, hands beginning to wander. The fire crackled beside them, casting dancing shadows. Rachel's breathing quickened as Clayton's lips found her throat, her hands tangling in his hair. "Nathan's just there," she whispered, even as she arched against him. "Then come with me." He stood, pulling her up. Just for a walk, to see the spring by moonlight. She knew it wasn't the spring he wanted to show her, but she took his hand anyway. They walked in charged silence to a grove of cottonwoods by the water, where soft grass made a natural bed. The moon painted everything silver and shadow. "Rachel," Clayton breathed against her mouth. "Are you sure?" "I've been sure since the day you fixed my gate," she whispered back. "Since I saw your beautiful hands bleeding from honest work. Since you looked at me like I was whole, not broken." They came together with desperate tenderness. Two souls scarred by loss finding healing in each other's arms. Each touch was a promise. Each whispered endearment, a vow. Under the stars, beside the singing water, they claimed each other fully, not in shame or secrecy, but in hope and fierce joy. Afterward, they lay entwined, grass cool against heated skin. Rachel traced patterns on Clayton's chest, marveling at the solid reality of him. "I should go back," she murmured without conviction. "Stay. The talk will happen anyway." He tilted her chin up. "But if you want to go, I'll walk you back." She kissed him instead of answering, and they loved again, slower this time, learning each other's rhythms and needs. When exhaustion finally claimed them, they slept curled together like paired apostrophes, the stream singing their lullaby. Dawn woke them, painting the sky rose and gold. Rachel stretched like a cat, then froze as reality intruded. "Oh, Lord, Nathan will know. Nathan's a smart man who was young once." Clayton pulled her back down. "Besides, we'll be married soon. Let them count the months if they want." "Such confidence, Mr. Hartwell." But she was smiling as she dressed, her whole being radiating a happiness Clayton had never seen before. They walked back hand in hand to find Nathan making coffee, his expression carefully neutral. "Morning, sis, Clay." He poured 3 cups. "Nice night for stargazing, was it?" Rachel blushed furiously, but Clayton just grinned. "Beautiful night. Perfect. Even. Good." Nathan's stern expression cracked into a smile. "About damn time, if you ask me. Now, can we get back to building? This roof won't raise itself." They worked through the day in perfect accord, even Rachel's embarrassment fading in the face of Nathan's easy acceptance. By sunset, the roof beams were in place, the structure finally resembling a real home. But as they celebrated their progress, none of them noticed the rider on the distant ridge, watching through field glasses before turning back toward town. 2 days later, the consequences arrived. Clayton was working alone, Nathan having taken Rachel to town for supplies, when 3 riders approached. Not Judith this time, but Theodore Blackwood himself, flanked by 2 hard-looking men Clayton recognized as hired guns from Tucson. "Hartwell." Theodore dismounted, his hand resting on his pistol. "We need to talk." "Talk, then. I know about you and the widow Wren." Theodore's smile was cold. "Quite the cozy arrangement. Tell me, does she know you're sitting on a fortune? Or are you playing the poor but noble act to get under her skirts?" Clayton's hands clenched, but he kept his voice level. "What I have or don't have is none of your business. Neither is Mrs. Wren. Everything in this territory is my business." Theodore stepped closer. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sell me this land for the $1,000 my wife generously offered. Then you're going to disappear. Leave the territory entirely." No. Theodore laughed. "You don't seem to understand. I know things about your lady friend, about her husband's death, the real story, not the wagon accident fairy tale. One word from me, and she'll hang for murder." The world tilted. Clayton forced himself to breathe. "You're lying." "Am I?" Thomas Wren was a drunk and a brute. Everyone knew it, even if they pretended otherwise. The night he died, he'd been beating her again. She pushed him down the stairs. He broke his neck. Theodore's eyes glittered with malicious triumph. "I have a witness willing to testify, unless, of course, you cooperate." Clayton studied the banker's smug face. mind racing. And if I sell, then my witness develops amnesia, misses. Wren remains a tragic widow instead of a murderess. You get to leave with money in your pocket. Everyone wins. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow noon. After that? Theodore shrugged. Well, frontier justice can be swift and unforgiving. They rode away, leaving Clayton standing in the ruins of his newfound happiness. He sat heavily on the cabin's threshold, head in his hands. If Theodore was telling the truth about Thomas Wren, but even if he was, did it matter? The Rachel he knew was gentle and kind, driven to desperate action by circumstances he could only imagine. But how could he protect her? Even his hidden fortune couldn't buy off a murder charge. Not if Theodore was determined. The banker held all the cards. Or did he? Clayton rose, decision crystallizing. He wouldn't run. He wouldn't abandon Rachel to face this alone. And he sure as hell wouldn't let Theodore Blackwood destroy the first good thing in his life since the fire. When Rachel and Nathan returned at dusk, Clayton was waiting. One look at his face and Rachel knew something was terribly wrong. What is it? She touched his cheek. Clay, what's happened? He told them everything, Theodore's threats, the accusation, the ultimatum. Nathan cursed viciously, but Rachel went very still, the color draining from her face. It's true, she whispered. About Thomas, he was going to kill me that night. I pushed him and he fell. She looked up at Clayton, eyes swimming with tears. I'm sorry. I should have told you. I understand if you want me to leave. Clayton pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. Never, you hear me? Never. He pressed his lips to her hair. We'll face this together. All of us. How? Nathan demanded. Blackwood owns the law in town. If he wants Rachel arrested, then we make sure he doesn't want that. Clayton's voice was steel. Theodore Blackwood is about to learn that some men can't be bought, threatened, or broken, and that the woman he's threatening is under my protection now. Rachel pulled back to look at him, hope and fear warring in her eyes. What are you going to do? What I should have done from the beginning. He kissed her forehead. Trust me. By tomorrow night, Theodore Blackwood will never threaten you again. The hidden fortune beneath his floor would finally serve its purpose, not to rebuild his own life, but to save the woman who'd made that life worth living. And if Theodore wanted to play games with people's lives, Clayton would show him what happened when you cornered a man with nothing left to lose but love. The months that followed Clayton's confrontation with Theodore Blackwood passed like a gentle dream. True to his word, Clayton had used a portion of his hidden fortune to hire the best lawyers from San Francisco, who quickly dismantled Theodore's threats with evidence of the banker's own criminal activities. Theodore, faced with exposure of his land-grabbing schemes and arson conspiracies, had fled the territory with federal marshals on his heels. Judith, abandoned and disgraced, had followed soon after. Now, as spring rain pattered on the roof of their completed cabin, Rachel stood at the window, one hand resting on the slight swell of her belly. Clayton came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his rough hands gentle over where their child grew. Penny for your thoughts. Mrs. Hartwell. She leaned back against him, smiling at the still new title. They'd married quietly in the small chapel at Whispering Creek, with only Nathan and a few trusted friends as witnesses. No grand affair, no society wedding, just two people promising to face whatever came together. I was thinking about the gardens, she said. The vegetables are coming in well, and the apple trees you planted are blooming by harvest time. She placed her hand over his. We'll have our baby helping us gather them, or sleeping through it all. Clayton chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Either way, it'll be perfect. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the rain nurture their land, no longer just his grandfather's legacy, but their shared future. The cabin had grown into a proper home, with Rachel's touches everywhere, curtains at the windows, rag rugs on the floors, herbs hanging from the rafters to dry. The catastrophe that had driven Clayton to this place seemed like another lifetime. "Nathan's coming," Rachel observed, spotting her brother's familiar figure riding up the muddy track. "And he's riding hard." Clayton frowned, already reaching for the rifle by the door. Old habits died hard. But when Nathan burst in, his face showed excitement rather than alarm. "You'll never guess who's at the trading post," he said, barely pausing to shake the rain from his hat. "Judith. She's back, and Lord Almighty. Clay, you should see her." Rachel's hand tightened in Clayton's. "What does she want?" "From what I heard, she's looking for work. Any work. Seems without Theodore's money, she discovered real quick that nobody wanted a scandal-ridden divorcee with expensive tastes and no skills." Clayton felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger. Just a distant pity. "That's no concern of ours." "Maybe not," Nathan agreed. "But she was asking about you. The trader, old Sam. He took great pleasure in telling her about your wedding, about the baby coming, about how you've been helping folks around here with loans to save their farms." He grinned. Said she went white as a sheet. "Nathan," Rachel chided gently, "don't take pleasure in someone's misfortune. After what she did to you both." "After what she did," Rachel repeated firmly. "We've built something better from the ashes. That's enough." 2 days later, Clayton was working on expanding the barn when he heard a horse approaching. He turned to find Judith sitting side-saddle on a tired-looking mare, her once fine dress travel-stained and mended. The months had not been kind to her. Her beauty remained, but sharper now, hollowed by hardship. "Hello, Clay." Her voice held none of its old arrogance. "Judith." He set down his hammer. "Waiting." She dismounted awkwardly, clearly unused to handling her own horse. I heard you were married, that you're expecting a child." "We are." "She's inside?" Judith glanced toward the cabin. "The widow Wren?" "Mrs. Hartwell. And yes," Judith flinched at the correction. "Of course. I'm sorry. She stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I came to apologize, and to ask, to beg, really, for your forgiveness." Clayton studied her, this woman who'd shared his bed for 12 years, who'd walked away laughing when he'd lost everything. "Why?" "Because I was wrong." The words came out in a rush. "About everything. I thought money and position mattered more than loyalty, than love. I threw away a good man for a criminal who abandoned me the moment trouble came." She met his eyes, her own swimming with tears. "I'm not asking for anything. Clay, I know I destroyed what we had. I needed you to know that I know what I lost." Before Clayton could respond, the cabin door opened. Rachel emerged, moving carefully with her changed balance, her face serene. "Mrs. Blackwood, would you like some coffee? You look tired." Judith's mouth opened in shock. "You'd welcome me into your home? After everything?" "You were his wife once," Rachel said simply. "Whatever came after, you shared years together. That means something." She smiled gently. "Besides, we've all made mistakes. Some of us were just luckier in our second chances." They sat around Rachel's kitchen table, the same one where Clayton had eaten his first meal as a guest in her home. The conversation was stilted at first, but Rachel's quiet grace gradually eased the tension. She served coffee and warm bread, treating Judith not as a former rival, but as a woman in need. "I don't understand," Judith finally said, staring at Rachel. "How can you be so kind? I said terrible things about you." "You said what you thought would hurt," Rachel replied. "People do that when they're in pain, but Clay told me once that the land endures, and I think people can too. We can choose to hold on to poison, or we can let it go and grow something better." Judith broke down then, sobbing into her hands. "I have nothing, no money, no prospects. I've burned every bridge, alienated everyone who might have helped. I don't even know where I'll sleep tonight." Clayton and Rachel exchanged a look, a whole conversation in a glance. Rachel nodded slightly. "There's a widow in town, Mrs. Patterson," Clayton said. "She needs help in her store. Room and board included. I could write you a reference." You do that? After everything? Everyone deserves a chance to start over. He said, I got mine. Maybe it's time you got yours. When Judith left an hour later, she carried a letter of recommendation and a small purse of coins. A loan, Rachel had insisted, though they all knew it would never be repaid. At the gate, Judith turned back. She's perfect for you, she told Clayton. I see that now, the way she looks at you, the way you move together like dance partners who know every step. I never understood you. Clay, I wanted to change you into something you weren't. She loves who you are. Be well, Judith. I'll try. She mounted her horse, then looked down at him one last time. That money you were always so secretive about, Uncle Marcus's inheritance. You have it now, don't you? Clayton said nothing, but his expression was answer enough. Judith laughed, but it was rueful rather than bitter. Of course you do. You were never a failure. Were you? You were just waiting for something worth building. She glanced toward the cabin where Rachel stood watching. Someone worth building with. She rode away, a diminished figure against the vast landscape. Clayton walked back to Rachel, who slipped her hand into his. That was well done, she said softly. It was your kindness that made it possible. I would have sent her away. No, Rachel disagreed. You wouldn't have. You're not that man anymore. The angry, bitter person who came here to hide. He's gone. You've become the man you were always meant to be. That night, as they lay together in their bed, a real bed now, with a proper frame Clayton had built and a quilt Rachel had sewn, she traced lazy patterns on his chest. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Not using the money sooner. You could have saved your ranch, kept your position in society. Then I never would have found you, Clayton said, pulling her closer. Never would have learned what really matters. That money sat hidden for years because I thought I needed to earn my way back to worthiness. But you taught me something different. What's that? That worthiness isn't about what you have or what you've lost. It's about what you're willing to build with someone else, one day at a time. He placed his hand over her belly, feeling the flutter of movement there. This is worth more than all the gold in Colorado. Thunder rolled across the valley, and rain began to fall harder, but inside their home, warm and dry and filled with love. Clayton and Rachel held each other close. They'd both walked through fire and lost to find each other. And now they were building something new from the ashes, not just a home or a family, but a life rooted in grace and second chances. I love you, Rachel whispered against his neck. My husband, and I love you. Clayton replied, my salvation. Outside, the spring storm washed the land clean, preparing it for new growth. Inside, two wounded hearts that had learned to trust again beat in perfect rhythm. Proof that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't hidden in strong boxes or buried beneath floorboards, but found in the courage to love after loss, to build after destruction, to hope after despair. The fortune that had waited so long to be claimed had served its purpose, not to restore Clayton's old life, but to protect the new one he and Rachel were creating together. And as they drifted toward sleep, listening to the rain on their roof and the whisper of new life between them, both knew that they were richer than they'd ever dreamed possible. The summer heat had given way to autumn's cool breath when Rachel's labor pains began. The baby wasn't due for another 3 weeks, but nature kept its own schedule. Clayton had been in the field when Nathan came riding hard, his face tight with worry. It's time, was all he said, and Clayton dropped everything, racing back to the cabin on Buck's successor, a young mare he'd bought at auction with some of his carefully managed fortune. Inside, he found Rachel gripping the bedpost, her face pale but determined. The midwife from town, Mrs. Eliza Hartman, was already there, her sleeves rolled up and her manner calm. About time you showed up, Rachel managed between contractions, trying to smile through the pain. Thought you might miss all the excitement. Clayton took her hand, feeling helpless in the face of her suffering. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. The hours that followed tested every limit of Clayton's endurance. Not his own, but watching Rachel's. She bore the pain with the same quiet strength she'd shown through all their trials, but as night deepened and the baby still hadn't come, fear crept into the room like smoke. "Something's wrong. Mrs." Hartman finally admitted. Her usually confident face creased with concern. "The baby's turned wrong. I can't." She looked at Clayton. "We might need the doctor from Prescott, but by the time someone rides there and back—" "No." Rachel's voice was fierce despite her exhaustion. "My baby will be born here, in our home. Clay, help me up. Rachel, trust me." She looked into his eyes. "Remember the hot spring, where you showed me I was whole?" Understanding dawned. The mineral springs his grandfather had discovered, with their natural heat and legendary healing properties. It was a desperate idea. But desperation bred innovation. "Nathan, help me carry her," Clayton ordered. "Mrs. Hartman, bring your supplies." They made a strange procession through the moonlit forest. Clayton carrying Rachel, Nathan lighting the way with lanterns, the midwife muttering prayers and clutching her medical bag. The spring steamed in its rocky hollow, surrounded by smooth stones worn by centuries of water. "This is highly irregular," Mrs. Hartman protested. But she was already helping ease Rachel into the warm water. "Nothing about our life has been regular," Rachel gasped, then cried out as another contraction seized her. The warm water seemed to ease her pain, and more importantly, to relax her cramped muscles. Clayton held her, supporting her weight, whispering encouragement and love into her ear. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to this most ancient of miracles. "I can feel the baby shifting," Mrs. Hartman said with wonder. "The water, the position, it's working." What followed was primal and beautiful and terrifying. Rachel drew on reserves of strength Clayton didn't know existed, her body working with nature instead of against it. And finally, as dawn painted the sky pink and gold, their daughter slipped into the world with a lusty cry that echoed off the rocks. "She's perfect, Mrs." Hartman declared, wrapping the baby quickly and handing her to Rachel. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a voice that could wake the dead." Rachel sobbed with relief and joy, cradling their daughter against her chest. The baby's eyes opened, the same gray as Clayton's, and seemed to look right into her parents' souls. "Hope," Rachel whispered. "Her name is Hope." Clayton kissed both his girls, his own tears mixing with the spring water. Hope Hartwell, born in water and starlight, stubborn as her mother. They made their way back to the cabin as the sun rose, Rachel wrapped in blankets and clutching their daughter, Clayton carrying them both with Nathan steadying his steps. Mrs. Hartman followed, shaking her head in amazement. "In 30 years of midwifing, I've never seen the like." She said, "That spring saved both their lives, I'd wager." News of the unusual birth spread through the territory like wildfire. Some called it a miracle, others just frontier ingenuity. But for Clayton and Rachel, it was simply another chapter in their unconventional love story. The weeks that followed were a blur of firsts: first smile, first laugh, first night of actual sleep. Hope proved to be a content baby, as if she knew how wanted she was, how hard her parents had fought for the life they now shared. It was during this honeymoon period of new parenthood that an unexpected letter arrived. Rachel found Clayton staring at it, his face unreadable. "What is it?" She shifted Hope to her other arm, coming to read over his shoulder. "It's from the Railroad Commission," Clayton said slowly. "They're offering to buy our land for—" "Rachel, look at this number." She gasped. It was more than they'd ever dreamed, enough to live like royalty for the rest of their lives. "But they want all of it," Clayton continued, "including the spring. They plan to build a resort around it, charge rich Easterners to bathe in the miracle waters." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, looking around their simple but beautiful home. "What do you think?" "I think," Clayton said carefully, "that some things aren't for sale. That spring saved you and Hope. My grandfather protected it. and now I understand why. The money. We have money. Maybe not railroad fortune, but enough. He pulled her close, careful of the baby between them. What good is all the gold in the world if we lose the land that healed us? Rachel smiled, standing on her toes to kiss him. I was hoping you'd say that, though maybe we could build a small bathhouse. Let local women use it during their labors. Share the blessing. Now that, Clayton agreed. Sounds like something worth building. A month later, they held a celebration for Hope's blessing at the spring. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, many of whom Clayton had quietly helped with loans to save their farms or start businesses. The community that had once shunned them now embraced them as pillars of frontier generosity. Even Mrs. Patterson came from town, bringing news of Judith. She's doing well, the shopkeeper reported. Hard-working, humble. She's even walking out with the new schoolteacher, a widower with 2 young boys who need a mother. I'm glad, Rachel said sincerely. Everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. As the sun set over the celebration, Clayton stood apart for a moment, watching his wife move through their guests with Hope in her arms, gracious and glowing. Nathan was regaling a group with a story of Hope's birth, embellishing it with each telling. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the air, along with laughter and music from a fiddle someone had brought. You did good, son. Clayton turned, half expecting to see his grandfather's ghost. Instead, it was old Sam McGraw, the blacksmith who'd stood up for him in the courthouse that awful day. Just trying to live up to the land, Clayton replied. No, Sam disagreed. You've done more than that. You've shown us all that a man can fall all the way down and still get back up. That love can grow in the ashes. That's a powerful thing. Clayton Hartwell? As if summoned by his thoughts, Rachel appeared at his elbow, passing Hope to him. The baby gurgled contentedly, grabbing at his shirt with tiny, perfect fingers. Dance with me? Rachel asked, smiling up at him. Always, he replied. They swayed together in the fading light, their daughter between them, surrounded by the community they'd built through generosity and grace. The spring bubbled nearby, eternal and healing, a reminder that some treasures were worth more than money. No regrets, Rachel whispered. How could I regret the path that led me to you? To this? He gestured at their full, rich life. I was a wealthy man who had nothing. Now I'm a man of modest means who has everything. Modest means? Rachel laughed. Clayton Hartwell, you're the richest man in the territory. You just measure wealth differently now. She was right. He realized. The fortune hidden under their floorboards had become something greater. Loans that saved farms, medicines for sick children, a new bell for the church, books for the school. They'd kept enough to live comfortably and help others do the same. The money that had once seemed so important had become merely a tool for building community. I love you, he said, the words still feeling like a miracle every time he spoke them. And I love you, she replied. My complicated, generous, wonderful husband. Hope chose that moment to voice her own opinion with a happy shriek that made everyone laugh. As the stars began to appear overhead, Clayton held his family close, listening to the spring's eternal song. He thought of his grandfather, of the legacy of endurance and faith the old man had left. He thought of his own journey through loss and bitterness to find grace. Most of all, he thought of tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that, spent with the woman who'd taught him that love could bloom in the most unlikely ground. The scarred backs of their hands touched as they held their daughter. Those scars now badges of honor rather than shame, proof of what they'd survived and what they'd built. The celebration continued around them, but for Clayton and Rachel, the whole world had shrunk to this perfect moment, their child in their arms, their love tested and true, their future bright with possibility. They'd walked through fire to find each other, and now they stood in the cool sweetness of evening, wealthy beyond measure in all the ways that truly mattered. The news of Clayton Hartwell's true wealth spread through the territory like wildfire after he publicly revealed his inheritance at the courthouse. He'd walked in carrying a leather satchel that morning, determined to defend Rachel against any lingering whispers about her past. What happened instead shocked everyone present. Your Honor, Clayton had addressed Judge Morrison, the same man who'd overseen his divorce. I'd like to make a matter of public record. My wife has been subjected to slander and gossip, and I aim to put an end to it. He'd opened the satchel, revealing documentation that made the court clerk's eyes widen. This is my inheritance from my late uncle, Marcus Hartwell. $10 million in bearer bonds and gold certificates, verified by the First National Bank of Denver. The courtroom had erupted in chaos. Men who'd bought his cattle cheap suddenly realized they'd cheated a millionaire. Women who'd snubbed Rachel felt the sting of their own prejudice. But Clayton wasn't finished. I've lived among you as a poor man, he'd continued, his voice carrying over the din. I've seen who offered kindness when they thought I had nothing, and who showed cruelty when they thought I couldn't fight back. My wife, Rachel Hartwell, has shown more grace and dignity than anyone in this room. Any man who speaks ill of her will answer to me. Any woman who whispers behind her back will find their husband's loans called in. He'd taken Rachel's hand then, standing tall beside her. We chose each other when we had nothing but love to offer. That makes our bond worth more than all this gold. Now, a week later, the aftershocks continued to ripple through town. Theodore Blackwood's abandoned mansion had been seized for his debts, and Judith, who had fainted at the news, was seen weeping in Mrs. Patterson's store, finally understanding the full magnitude of what she'd thrown away. Clayton found her there one afternoon, stocking shelves with shaking hands. She looked up when the bell chimed, and her face crumpled. "Come to gloat?" she asked bitterly. "No, come to settle accounts." He placed an envelope on the counter. "There's enough there to start over properly, maybe back east, where no one knows your story." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why would you help me after everything?" "Because I've learned that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Rachel taught me that." He turned to leave, then paused. "Be well, Judith. Find whatever peace you can." She sobbed behind him as he left. But they were cleaner tears somehow, the beginning of release rather than the bitterness of regret. The town's attitude toward Clayton and Rachel transformed overnight. Suddenly, everyone remembered how they'd always known Clay was special, and how Rachel was such a lovely woman, really. Invitations poured in for dinners, social events, charitable committees. Rachel handled the attention with the same grace she'd shown in adversity. At the first major social gathering they attended, a harvest dance at the town hall, she wore a simple but elegant dress Clayton had commissioned from the best seamstress in Prescott. Her scar was partially visible where the dress dipped in back, but she wore it without shame. "You're staring," she murmured to Clayton as they danced. "Can't help it. You're the most beautiful woman in the territory." "Flatterer. Half these women are wearing Paris fashions. And you outshine them all in homespun." He spun her, delighting in her laugh. "Besides, you're the only one who loved me in patched breeches." The evening progressed with the peculiar dynamic of people trying to curry favor while Clayton and Rachel remained graciously distant. They'd learned too much about human nature to fully trust the sudden warmth. It was young banker Garrett Walsh who finally broke through the facade, approaching Clayton with genuine humility. "Mr. Hartwell, I owe you an apology. I was one of Theodore's men. I helped pressure people to sell their land cheap." Clayton studied the young man, barely 25, with an earnest face and trembling hands. And I want to make amends. I have records of every transaction Theodore orchestrated, names, amounts, threats made. If you help me expose it all, maybe we can return some of what was stolen." "Why come to me?" Garrett glanced across the room to where a young woman was watching anxiously. "Because I want to be the kind of man worthy of marrying Margaret Stone. Her father lost his ranch to Theodore's schemes. I can't court her with honor until I've tried to fix what I helped break." Clayton recognized the look in the young man's eyes, the same desperate need for redemption he'd once felt. "Come by tomorrow. Bring everything you have." What followed was a month of intense legal maneuvering. With Clayton's resources backing the effort and Garrett's inside knowledge, they unwound dozens of fraudulent land deals. Families got their homes back. Ranchers received fair compensation for losses. The territorial governor himself came to oversee the proceedings. "You've done a great service, Mr. Hartwell," Governor Samuel Hughes said at the conclusion. "You could have used your wealth to build an empire. Instead, you've used it to restore justice. I've learned that empires built on others' misfortune don't last." Clayton replied, "But communities built on mutual support endure." The governor smiled, spoken like a man who should run for office. "No, thank you. I have everything I need." That evening, as Clayton and Rachel sat on their porch watching Hope toddle after fireflies, she was walking early. Determined as her mother, Nathan rode up with a grin. "You'll never guess," he said, dismounting. Garrett Walsh just proposed to Margaret Stone in the middle of Main Street. Got down on one knee in the mud and everything. "And?" Rachel prompted, scooping up Hope before she could catch a firefly. She said yes, of course. Half the town was watching and cheering. Nathan accepted the cup of coffee Clayton offered. "It's like the whole territory's gone love crazy. That miracle spring of yours has couples lining up hoping for its blessing." They laughed, but there was truth in it. The story of Hope's birth had become legend, and the small bathhouse Clayton had built was indeed popular with expectant mothers. "Speaking of love," Rachel said with studied casualness, "when are you going to court the school teacher? Miss Catherine has been making eyes at you for months." Nathan flushed. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Nathan Wren, you helped build our happiness. Don't you think it's time you found your own?" As if to emphasize her point. Hope reached for her uncle, babbling, "Nate! Nate!" He took her, his tough features softening as they always did around his niece. "Maybe," he admitted. "Been thinking about settling down. Can't let you two have all the happiness in the territory." As night fell and Nathan headed home, Clayton and Rachel put Hope to bed in her little room, another addition to their ever-growing home. The child went down easily, worn out from chasing fireflies and charming everyone at the celebration. "She's going to be a force of nature," Rachel said softly, smoothing Hope's dark hair, like her mother. They made their way to their own room, the evening routine comfortable and precious. As Rachel brushed her hair, Clayton watched from the bed, still sometimes unable to believe this was his life. "Any regrets about the announcement?" she asked. "We could have kept the money secret, lived quietly, and let you continue to suffer whispers and slights." "Never." He held out his hand, drawing her to sit beside him. "Besides, secrets have a way of poisoning things. Better to live in truth. Whatever comes." "Whatever comes," she agreed, then smiled. "Though I think what's coming might surprise you." "Oh." She took his hand, placing it on her still flat belly. "Hope is going to have a brother or sister." Clayton's eyes widened. "Already? But the doctor said it would be difficult, not impossible. And apparently, our little miracle spring has more blessings to give." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like spun glass. "Rachel, are you sure? Is it safe?" "As safe as life ever is, Mrs. Hartman says I'm healthy as a horse and twice as stubborn." She cupped his face. "Don't look so worried. We've faced worse odds. I can't lose you." "You won't. We're fighters, remember? Both of us." They held each other in the lamplight, planning and dreaming. Another child meant expanding the house again, perhaps hiring help for Rachel. Their wealth meant they could afford the best care, though Rachel insisted she wanted Mrs. Hartman and the spring again when the time came. "We've come so far from that first day," she murmured against his chest. "When I brought you bread and saw such pain in your eyes. You saved me. We saved each other." As they settled for sleep, Clayton thought about the strange paths that had led them here, from riches to ruin to redemption, with love the constant thread weaving through it all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, raising children in a territory still finding its way, managing wealth responsibly, continuing to build the community they'd chosen. But tonight, with Rachel in his arms and Hope safe in her bed and new life growing between them, Clayton Hartwell knew himself to be the richest man not just in the territory, but in all the world. Not because of the gold in his bank or the land under his feet, but because he'd learned the greatest truth of all, that love, once tested and proven true, was the only treasure that multiplied when shared. The spring sang its eternal song outside their window, and Clayton smiled in the darkness. His grandfather had been right. The land endured. But it was the love that grew on that land that made the endurance worthwhile. 5 years had passed since that night Clayton revealed his fortune to the world. The valley that had once held only a burned-out homestead now bloomed with life. The main house had grown into a gracious home, surrounded by gardens where Hope, now 6, played with her younger brother Marcus, named for the uncle whose legacy had saved them all. At 3, Marcus had his mother's dark hair and his father's steady gray eyes. On this particular evening, Clayton sat in his study, reviewing a letter that had arrived from San Francisco. Rachel found him there, lamplight casting shadows on his weathered face. "What is it?" she asked, settling beside him. Even after all these years, her presence still brought him peace. "Remember Judith?" Rachel's expression softened. "Of course. How is she?" "She's written to thank us. Apparently, she took the money I gave her and opened a boarding house for women escaping difficult situations. She's remarried, a doctor who helps at her shelter. She says," he cleared his throat, unexpectedly moved. "She says she names a room after us, the Hope Room, for women starting over." "Oh, Clay." Rachel took his hand. "That's wonderful. She's found her purpose. Says she finally understands that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the children's laughter from the garden where Nathan was teaching them to catch fireflies. He'd married Catherine 2 years ago, and their twin boys often joined the games. "We've all come so far," Rachel mused. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if things had been different? If the fire hadn't taken your ranch? If Judith had stayed? Then I'd have lived and died a wealthy man who never knew what real riches were." Clayton said simply, "I'd have missed you. Missed this." He gestured to encompass their life. "Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are just preparation for the best things." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Mrs." Hartman entered, her face creased with concern. "Sorry to disturb, but there's a family at the gate. Settlers. By the look of them, their wagon's broken down, and the woman's in labor." Without hesitation, Rachel rose. "Bring them in. Clayton, have Nathan help the men with the wagon. I'll prepare the guest room." "The spring?" Clayton suggested. Rachel smiled. "Let's see how she's doing first. But yes, have the bathhouse ready just in case." The family, the Millers from Ohio, were typical of many who passed through now. Word had spread about the miracle spring and the generous family who shared it freely. What they found was simply human kindness and a safe place to rest. By dawn, with Mrs. Hartman's skilled help and Rachel's quiet support, another healthy baby had entered the world, this time in a proper bed, though the mother did spend some time in the warm spring to ease her pains. "We can't thank you enough," Mr. Miller said, pumping Clayton's hand. "We heard stories about you folks, but didn't believe them. A millionaire who lives simple and helps strangers. Seemed like a tall tale." "No tale," Clayton said. "Just people helping people. That's how the West gets won, not through conquest, but community." The Millers stayed a week, recovering and repairing their wagon. Like many before them, they left as friends, carrying stories of unexpected grace found in an unlikely place. That evening, the extended family gathered for their weekly dinner, a tradition Rachel had insisted on. Nathan and Catherine were there with their boys, along with several other families they'd helped over the years who'd settled nearby. The table groaned under the weight of shared dishes, and conversation flowed like wine. "Uncle Clay," Hope piped up, "tell us again about when you were poor." "I was never poor," Clayton corrected gently. I just didn't know where my wealth was hidden. Was it really under the floor? Marcus asked, eyes wide. Some of it, but the real treasure was waiting for me at Whispering Creek Ranch. Mama, the children chorused, and Rachel laughed. Your father's a romantic, she told them. But yes, we found each other when we both thought we had nothing left to offer. That's when you learn what really matters. After the meal, as the women cleared dishes and the men sat on the porch with their pipes, young Garrett Walsh, now a respected banker running honest loans for farmers, brought up something that had been on many minds. Clayton, the territorial legislature is meeting next month. There's talk of statehood coming soon. They need good men to help shape what Arizona becomes. Men like you. I'm no politician, Clayton protested. No, Nathan agreed. But you're something better. A man who's been at the bottom and the top. Who knows that character matters more than currency. The territory needs that wisdom. Clayton looked through the window to where Rachel was teaching Hope to dry dishes properly, Marcus helping by playing with the suds. His life was here, complete and perfect. I'll think about it, he said finally. But whatever I decide, it won't change who we are or how we live. This valley, these people, this is what matters. Later, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Clayton and Rachel walked hand in hand to the spring. It bubbled peacefully in its stone housing, steam rising in the cool night air. If you want to serve in the legislature, I'll support you, Rachel said. But don't do it because others think you should. What do you think? She considered. I think you've already been serving. One family, one kindness at a time. Maybe it's time to help on a larger scale. But Clayton, she turned to face him. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me we won't lose this. The simplicity, the closeness, the way Hope runs barefoot in the garden and Marcus thinks catching frogs is better than gold. He pulled her close. I promise. No matter what comes, we stay who we are. The couple who found each other in ashes and built something beautiful. They stood together by the spring, middle-aged now, but still strong, still in love. The years had added lines to their faces and gray to their hair, but also depth to their joy and certainty to their bond. The children will wake up soon, Rachel murmured. Dawn comes early with little ones. Let it come, Clayton said. Every dawn with you is a gift. They walked back to their house, built with their own hands and filled with their own love. Behind them, the spring sang its eternal song, and ahead of them, their children slept peacefully, dreaming of fireflies and adventures. In his grandfather's desk, restored now and polished with care, lay papers for the territorial legislature, waiting for Clayton's decision. Next to them sat a simpler document, the deed to the spring, already signed over to the community in perpetuity, ensuring no railroad or developer could ever claim it. As they prepared for bed, Rachel showed Clayton the latest letter from back east. More families were coming, drawn by stories of a place where hard work was rewarded and kindness wasn't weakness. Their valley was becoming a town. Their town was becoming a symbol of what the American frontier could be at its best. No regrets, Clayton asked, echoing their old ritual. How could I regret the life that gave me you, that gave us them? She gestured toward the children's rooms. We've been blessed beyond measure. Clayton Hartwell. Amen to that, he whispered, drawing her close. Outside, coyotes called across the desert, and an owl hunted in the darkness. But inside the Hartwell home, all was warmth and peace. They'd traveled far from that day in the courthouse, when Clayton lost everything he thought mattered. In losing it all, he'd found what actually did. Love that endured, family that sustained, community that supported, and purpose that transcended wealth. The money that had waited so patiently under his floor had built more than buildings. It had built bridges between people, hope for the hopeless, and second chances for those who'd thought their stories were over. And at the center of it all, two people who'd chosen each other when choosing seemed foolish, who'd loved when love seemed impossible, as sleep claimed them. Clayton's last thought was of his grandfather, who'd protected this land and its sacred spring. It endures, the old man had said, and so it had, not just the land, but the love that grew there, the lives that were saved there, the future that was born there. In the morning, there would be chores and children, decisions to make and people to help. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of their room, Clayton and Rachel Hartwell held each other close, rich beyond measure in all the currencies that actually counted. Their love story, begun in ashes and tempered by trials, had become a legacy that would last long after the gold was spent and their names were carved in stone. The true wealth, they'd learned, was never in what you held, but in what you shared. Never in what you gained, but in what you gave. Never in rising above others, but in lifting others up with you. And that was the greatest treasure of all. Thank you for joining us around the Wild West Campfire to hear Clayton and Rachel's story. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. If this tale of love, loss, and redemption touched your heart, please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories from the American frontier, and share your thoughts about what true wealth means to you. Until next time, partners, keep your fires burning and your hearts open to the unexpected treasures life might bring.